Thank you very much. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has told this programme the government has an issue with disabilities, quote unquote. He's calling on them to scrap plans to limit access to a key disability benefit. The government wants to reverse two recent tribunals that would have made another 160,000 people eligible for personal independence payment, or PIP. Here's what's going on. PIP is a benefit paid to the long-term ill or disabled. It is replacing an older payment called Disability Living Allowance. PIP has two parts, one to cover daily living expenses, the other to cover mobility or getting around. Under PIP, you are scored based on your needs. More than 8 points and you get the lower or standard rate. £55.10 a week for expenses and £21.80 for mobility. More than 12 points and you get an enhanced rate. £82.30 for living and £57.45 for mobility. Last year, judges at two tribunals said more points should be given if you suffer overwhelming psychological distress when making a journey alone, or if you need help taking medication. That, says the government, would make another 160,000 people eligible and will cost taxpayers £3.7 billion over the next 4 years. Whenever we talk about PIP on this programme, we get hundreds of messages from you. Last week, we were contacted by Brian Rollinson, who served with the British Army in Northern Ireland in the 1980s. He was injured back then and later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Our reporter Jim Reid went to meet him at his home in Wiltshire.
I was a very young boy, very naive, no military background whatsoever, and the first tour was very tough. It was walking the streets of Northern Ireland not knowing, will you be coming back safely, had a massive effect on me later on in life. My day-to-day life, I have daily flashbacks, traumas, triggers, nightmares. I try and avoid difficult situations like supermarkets, going on public transport, and PTSD. It's an illness that I don't think people still understand. So, look at the paperwork that I have to submit. It makes you feel so worthless. I was very relieved after the first tribunal that we won our case, and like I said, common sense prevailed, and I thought, right, I can get on now living. In 2015, so we're looking 2 years straight after the first tribunal, I had a letter saying we need to do another assessment on your disability and care. And I was thinking to myself, what's happening now? My world fell apart again. I thought this was all sorted. I thought, that's it, it's all done. I've got some breathing space, I can relax, but then letter comes through the post, claims been looked at, and I've gone back down to standard. Devastated, absolutely bloody devastated. I don't want to be too blunt, but it's pathetic. I had a bad time. And I don't think that these people who are making these decisions really realise the impact. And it was a very difficult time yet again. You feel like a criminal because of what I had to go through over the last couple of years. Yeah, I didn't want to be here anymore. And I think that speaks for itself without me saying those words, but this really got me down, really did. And I think ministers, government, need to have a look at the system in whole and see how we can improve it.
Well, as we've been hearing, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has told this programme that Theresa May's government appears to have an issue over disabilities. This is the full interview. Mr Corbyn began by describing what action he's demanding from ministers on personal independence payments.
The court made a ruling and the government did not put it to the Social Security Advisory Committee, which is what they would normally do before introducing legislation. Instead, on the 23rd of February, they laid a statutory instrument before Parliament to negate the decision of the court, and thus 164,000 people will not receive enhanced PIP payments from the beginning of April, and I think that is disgraceful. We will obviously oppose the statutory instrument when it comes before Parliament, but that's the government's position. They are wrong.
The government say everybody currently on personal independence payments will continue to receive it.
The current recipients will continue to receive it. These are new applications for people suffering from severe conditions such as post-traumatic stress and a number of others who will not now get the necessary enhanced payments in order to live an independent life. These are people suffering from quite serious mental health conditions. I think they deserve to be supported. The government's policy, indeed in law, there is a parity of esteem between physical and mental health. This seems to be undermined by the government's decision.
The DWP say 65% of recipients, so 65% of those getting PIP who have a mental health condition, get the highest rate of the daily living expenses versus 22% under the previous Labour policy of the disability living allowance.
The number getting personal independence payments is considerable, and they deserve it and they're entitled to it. This decision is about new applicants of people suffering from mental health conditions who will not get the enhanced payments. I think they should. We will challenge this in Parliament, and I think it's extremely unfair.
Can you explain why having a mental health condition like anxiety, which was the condition referred to by Theresa May's head of her policy unit, is as serious in your view as having a severe disability?
Well, he used some very derogatory language and said this is essentially people who are not don't have a serious condition at all. I think he should talk to those that do have these conditions, those that have developed obsessive disorders, those that have post-traumatic stress, a number of others do need support in order to be able to live independently and get support possibly for their condition to improve and maybe even recover from it altogether. But simply denying them the support they need in order to live independently actually is counterproductive, because their condition will probably get worse. They will then become a greater cost because they will need possibly care in a residential setting.
I wonder if you think maybe there should be one payment that everyone receives, regardless of the severity of either their disability or their mental health condition.
The principle behind personal independence payments is the principle of independent living. That is, those who've got conditions ought to be able to live independently in their own home, and therefore the costs obviously vary between different parts of the country, different levels of conditions. That means there has to be an assessment made. If you have a flat rate benefit for the whole country, it isn't necessarily reflective of the costs of some people. Also, some people need much more care and support than others. They might need somebody to come in and help them. Others might be able to manage better on their own with minimal help. It depends on the condition. You cannot actually legislate quite simply for every single mental health condition that exists.
You will know that the Disability Welfare Bill has been steadily increasing for around 2 decades now. Are you saying this morning that you accept that that bill is just going to keep on increasing in the future?
I think it probably will increase in the future for a number of reasons. One is we have an older population. Medical research has moved on a lot, and people are able to survive quite bad injuries when they end up with a disability condition which in previous decades maybe they would not have survived from. And so I do think the costs go up, but I think we have to just judge ourselves as a society. Do we believe that those with any form of disability can contribute to our society? Yes. Do we believe they should be able to live independently? Yes. Does that mean we have to support them? Obviously, yes. That's part of the price of civilized way of living.
The government say the changes they want to make would save £3.7 billion. Where would you get that £3.7 billion from?
Well, I would start by not reducing corporate levels of taxation. I would continue by not reducing the level of inheritance tax. I would look at it as a cost that we all have to bear as a society for the benefit of all of us.
That reversal in corporation tax cut, you've spent it quite a few times now. You've said you'll use it to plug the gap in social care funding. You'll use it to address the pay freeze on public sector workers. You'll abolish tuition fees and bring back grants for university students. And all that adds up to £14 billion a year.
There would have to be other sources of income as well for central government. That is issue that has to be decided upon, has to be examined very carefully, but I just make the point that this government is moving on a trajectory of lowering the top rate of taxation, lowering the levels of corporate taxation, lowering the levels of inheritance tax. All that has a price to pay, and it's all of us who have to pay that price.
Reversing the corporation tax cut saves £7.5 billion over 5 years. Reintroducing the 50p tax rate, which you said you would do, brings in around 100 million a year. I mean, where else would you pay for this 3.7 billion for these enhanced payments for more claimants?
Let's start from the principle we should pay them. Start from the principle that these people are entitled to that care and support, and we have to raise the taxation to deal with it. We're also considering the level which we would raise corporation tax in order to raise more funds for public needs, because we do need, as you quite rightly identify, to fund education improvements as well as maintain a decent level of funding for those with disabilities, and also of course properly fund our NHS and social care system.
You'll know that there is a certain level of public support for reducing the welfare bill.
There is always a public support for lots of different things, but I think anyone who's talked to somebody who's gone through a mental health crisis, somebody that's going through post-traumatic stress, or somebody suffering from physical disability, everyone would also recognise they have a right to be able to live their lives as independently as possible and as decently as possible. I think when you put to the public the simple human case for spending all of our resources on helping those people to lead fuller lives, then I think there's a lot of support for that.
Do you think Theresa May and her government have an issue with people with disabilities?
They seem to have an issue over social care, and they seem to have an issue over disabilities, because last year they did try to remove the personal independence payments by £4 billion. They then reversed that cut after Ian Duncan-Smith resigned a few days later, and then agreed to carry on paying it. So there is a deficit built into the budget already because of that. They then see this as a further opportunity to prevent the bill rising further. Well, I think they just need to think about the kind of society we are, the way we support people, and I hope they will change their minds on this. We will certainly oppose the statutory instrument in Parliament, that's the legal jargon for bringing this thing in, and I hope the government will change its mind. We certainly have never changed our minds on this. People need support.
Why would they have an issue with people with certain disabilities?
I think they have an issue about being prepared to argue the case to spend public money in supporting people who need to be able to live as independently as possible. I mean, all the time I've been in Parliament, there's been debates about disability. We've moved a long, long way. We got equalities legislation, we got disability rights through, we've got parity of esteem through on physical and mental health. Things have changed a great deal. Clearly, there is a cost involved in that. It's how you judge and measure a society.
Let me ask you one or two other questions, if I may. One of your own Labour MPs said the former Conservative Prime Minister John Major is more effective at attacking Theresa May than Labour right now. Is that colleague of yours right?
I've no idea who he is or she is or why they said that. We are attacking this government on issues of health and social care, as we've just been discussing. We're attacking this government on issues of economic development, of unemployment, of underemployment, of 0 hours contracts, of insecurity in work. We're attacking this government on all these fronts. Because John Major is critical of the government over the European Union, so are we. We have accepted the result of the referendum, but we also want to make sure there is a good, effective, tariff-free trading relationship with Europe in the future.
Former Conservative leader William Hague says that Theresa May should scrap the legislation that would then allow her to call a snap general election. Would you welcome that?
Well, the legislation was put in with all party support only in the last Parliament, which is known as the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. The Fixed Term Parliaments Act requires that the Parliament goes for the 5 years that it was elected for in the first place, unless two-thirds of all MPs vote for a dissolution of Parliament. We supported that legislation because we wanted to ensure greater stability in politics, but if there's a proposal to get rid of it, then I'm sure we'd consider it.
Right, so does that mean you would welcome a snap general election or not?
I want to see a different government. I don't want to see this government in office.
So you would welcome a snap general election. Theoretically, theoretically, are you saying you'd win it then?
We would take our case out for social justice in this country, a case out for an investment-led economy, a case out for dealing with the housing crisis rather than leaving so many people living in housing stress or homeless or unable to leave the parental home because they can't afford anywhere to buy. We'd take all those issues out of the kind of society we are and the kind of society we want to be.
The latest poll puts Labour 18 points behind the Conservative government. That's the biggest lead since you became leader, and it's been like that for a few months now, which suggests that even if voters agree with your message, they like your message, they've stopped listening to you as the messenger.
We're getting out there with our case for National Health Service, our case for social care, our case for jobs, our case for housing, our case for decency in society. We will put that out there. We'll put that out there because the levels of inequality in this country are totally unacceptable, and the inability of so many young people to make the most of their lives because the levels of debt they get into in university, or the very low levels of pay they get, or the very high cost of rent in the private rented sector.
And if you put that out there, do you think that will be enough for you to win a snap general election?
We'll be out there campaigning. We'll be out there taking our message of hope to the people of this country, and we're very confident that that message will be well received.
Does that mean, yes, you could win a snap general election?
We will take our case out. We will do our very best to win an election. Nobody knows the result of an election before they go into it, but we do know that we have a strong, moral and just case to put to the people of this country of the kind of country we could be.
You definitely won't say, yes, you could win a snap general election.
Nobody can say they're going to win an election. All you can say is you go into an election absolutely determined to win it so that you can deliver for the people of this country the kind of society they deserve and we believe is possible.
I wonder, is the soft coup that your Shadow Chancellor revealed recently, is that over or still ongoing?
I'm asking all Labour MPs to get behind the strategy we're putting forward, get behind an investment-led economy, get behind our opposition to what this government is doing in creating greater inequality in our society. We have a very large party membership out there campaigning week in, week out, and we have council and mayoral elections coming up. We're all going to be together on those doorsteps winning those elections.
But do you think privately there are some of your colleagues who are plotting against you still?
I think there's a media obsession with the internal workings of the Labour Party.
Well, it was John McDonnell, it was your Shadow Chancellor who told us about a soft coup.
No. I know. Listen, let's get out there on the policies. Let's get out there united as a party, determined to change the way in which people live in our society so they can live better lives. That's what politics is really all about.
What do you want to see from the Chancellor in tomorrow's budget?
What I would like to see is sufficient funding for the NHS and social care. I think that's a key. What I would also like to see is addressing the issues of the school funding crisis, which means that many schools are now faced with the horrible prospect of laying off teachers or teaching assistants, classes getting bigger, and children's support in education getting less. I want to see those issues addressed. I also want to see something very positive about housing, particularly development of council housing so that people can get some somewhere decent to live rather than having to pay often very excessive rents for inadequate quality private rented accommodation.
We're expecting an announcement on an increase in funding for school places in the budget, including for new grammar school places. What do you think of those Conservative plans?
I think they're barking up the wrong tree completely on this. The issue is of school funding and school places. The issue isn't going around to develop selective education. The issue is supporting the schools that we've got and supporting the principle of local community schools rather than selection. There is no great public support for selection because they realise if you have selection of one group of people, somebody else doesn't get selected.
And please forgive me, Mr. Corbyn, I'm going to come back to my question about whether you think you would win a snap general election. Are you telling me? Are you telling me that you are confident you would win a general election?
We're going to take our case out to the country. We're very confident of the support we can get in order to win an election to take our case to the British people. Don't underestimate the support there is for the Labour Party. Don't underestimate the anger there is out there at the levels of inequality and injustice within our society. We'll expose all of that. That's where our case is very, very strong.
Could you answer yes or no, please?
Listen, you've asked me the question many, many times. How many times do I have to tell you? We're taking our case out there to win because we believe we can win.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.